Okay, let's dive into this. We're looking today at a really critical, but maybe less visible side of football. The rules around young players moving across borders.
It's a fascinating area,
Do
definitely.
you think about that buzz, finding a brilliant young talent, but their path, it's not just about skill. It's tangled up in these really specific regulations
hmm
designed, well, supposedly to protect them.
Right?
But what actually happens when these global FIFA rules meet, say, national systems? And what does it all mean for the clubs, the associations, the families, and, the kids themselves?
Yeah, that's the core question, isn't it?
That's exactly what we're unpacking in this deep dive. We're digging into FIFA's regulations on the status and transfer of players, the RSTP, specifically looking at minors, so anyone under 18.
And we're using some really telling examples, right? Those big Spanish cases that went all the way to the Court of Arbitration for Sport.
Exactly. Cases involving huge clubs and their national association. That's where you see the rules really tested.
And guiding us through this, we've got two main sources. There's an academic article analyzing those CAS cases in depth, the legal arguments, the outcomes.
Okay.
And then we also have an official guide straight from FIFA, which explains the practical side, how you actually apply under these rules.
Right. So our goal here is to cut through that complexity, pull out the really essential bits from these sources, and get a handle on the real-world impact. This deep dive, it's for you, the listener, to help you grasp the core principles and sort of the key takeaways from all this material.
Get you quickly up to speed on a pretty dense topic.
Exactly. So let's start with the basics, the foundation. What does the rule book actually say?
Okay. Well, the heart of it is FIFA's regulations on the status and transfer of players, the RSTP. And for our focus, Article 19 is key. That's the one dealing specifically with minors, defined as players under 18.
And the headline in Article 19.1 is pretty stark, isn't it? A flat-out ban.
It is a strict prohibition on the international transfer of minor players.
Why such a hard line? What's the thinking behind that?
Well, the stated aim, and it's highlighted in the sources, is all about protecting young players. FIFA wants to guarantee their welfare, prevent exploitation, and stop human trafficking disguised as football opportunities.
Okay, that makes sense. Protection first. But surely there must be situations where a young player can move internationally legitimately. Like, what if their whole family moves for work?
Precisely. And that's where Article 19.2 comes in. It lays out very specific, tightly controlled exceptions to that general ban.
Right, the exceptions. Let's break those down. The first one, people often call it the parents' rule. That sounds like it covers the family moving scenario.
Yes, that's the one. This exception allows a transfer if the player's parents move to the new country, but, and this is crucial, for reasons genuinely not linked to football.
Not linked to football. That seems like the key phrase there. So the parents have a new job offer, maybe, or they're moving for their own studies, perhaps.
Exactly. The FIFA guide actually lists examples. A new job for the parents, unconnected to the club, moving for their own education, returning to their home country, family reunion, even things like investment, medical reasons, retirement.
So quite a range, but the motivation has to be independent of the child's football.
Absolutely, that's the hurdle. The documentation needs to prove the move would happen anyway, regardless of the football aspect.
And it specifies parents moving. What if it's just one parent? Or maybe the child moves without either parent for some reason.
The rules do allow for that in very limited circumstances. If a minor moves with only one parent, you need strong proof, like court orders showing that parent has sole custody or the other parent consents. If they move without parents, maybe with a legal guardian, the bar is even higher. You need clear legal proof of guardianship and that the move is genuinely in the child's best interest, separate from football.
Okay, so proving the why behind the family's move is absolutely central to that exception. What's the next main one?
That would be the EUEE rule. This one is specifically for players aged 16 to 18.
Right, older minors.
Yes, and it only applies for moves within the European Union or the European Economic Area.
And this exception puts some serious obligations on the club signing the player, doesn't it?
Big time. The club has to guarantee several things. First, top-level sporting training, comparable to the best in that country.
Okay.
But just as importantly, they must provide proper academic or vocational training. The idea is to ensure the player can pursue an alternative career if football doesn't pan out.
Like a safety net. I think I saw something in the FIFA guide about a minimum amount of schooling.
Yes. There's guidance suggesting around 8 hours per WIT as a guideline for that academic or vocational part. And the guide clarifies that online classes can count, which is practical.
Ah,
But the club still has to make sure the player is properly enrolled, supported, maybe even has a mentor assigned. And of course, they need to provide comprehensive welfare arrangements, accommodations, supervision, the lot. It's about the whole person.
so it's not just about football development, it's about their future education and well-being too. That makes sense. Does this EUEA rule ever cover players coming into the EUEA from outside?
Well, based on past decisions, yes, it potentially can. If the player holds nationality from an EU or EEA country, this exception might apply even if they're moving from, say, South America into Spain, provided they're 16, 18 and the club meets all those demanding conditions.
Interesting. Okay, so that's the parents' rule and the EEE rule. What about the third main statutory one, the 50-50 rule? Sounds geographical.
It is, entirely. This one deals with players who live very close to a national border. It has two distance tests that both have to be met.
Okay, what are they?
First, the player's home and the new club's headquarters must both be within 50 kilometers of their shared national border.
50 kilometers. And how's that measured? Straight line or?
Good question. The FIFA guide says that 50 kilometers is measured as the crow flies, a direct line on the map.
Okay, straight line.
But there's a second distance test. The total travel distance, the actual route by road between the player's home and the club's HQ cannot be more than 100 kilometers.
Ah, I see. So you might be 40 kilometers from the border as the crow flies, but if the only road involves a huge detour making it 120 kilometers to the club, you wouldn't qualify.
Exactly that. And one more crucial condition for this one. The player must continue living at home with their parents. They can't move to the club's country.
Right, they commute across the border essentially. Okay, so those are the three big exceptions for transfers under 19.2. What if a minor moves to a new country and has never actually been registered with any club before? They want to play organized football for the first time there.
That scenario falls under Article 19.3, which covers the first registration of a non-national minor. Like transfers, this is also generally prohibited.
Unless?
Unless one of those Article 19.2 exceptions applies, parents' rule, EUEEA 50-50. However, there's one extra exception that applies only to first registrations. It's often called the 5-year rule.
The 5-year rule? What's that?
It allows a first registration if the minor player has lived continuously in the new country for at least the 5 years immediately before they request to register.
The 5 years continuously. Is that interpreted strictly?
Extremely strictly, based on the FIFA guide. The National Association applying has to prove it beyond reasonable doubt. That means providing solid evidence of uninterrupted residence for that entire 5-year period. Things like school records, residency permits, proof of accommodation.
Beyond reasonable doubt. That's a high bar.
It really is. It underlines how seriously FIFA takes preventing loopholes.
Okay, so we have the main statutory exceptions. Are there any others that have kind of emerged over time?
Yes, practice and decisions have recognized a couple more specific situations. One is for unaccompanied refugee minors.
Right, humanitarian grounds.
Exactly. The move has to be clearly driven by humanitarian reasons, often involving official refugee status, and proof they can't safely return home. The other is for exchange student players.
And the conditions there.
For exchange students, the move must be primarily for a recognized academic program. Football has to be secondary, and the stay is typically limited, often to a maximum of 1 year. They expect the student to return home or age out afterwards. Again, lots of documentation is needed, proof of the exchange program, custody arrangements, etc.
So it's not just about fitting into an exception category. You need official sign-off too, right?
Absolutely critical. That's Article 19.4 and the annexes. For every single international transfer and every first registration of a minor aged 10 or older, you must get approval from a specific body within the FIFA subcommittee.
10 or older. That age was clarified relatively recently.
Yes, in 2015. Before that, there was some ambiguity, especially around the youngest players. Now it's clear, 10 and above needs approval.
And how does this approval process actually work? Does the club apply?
No, and this is a key point highlighted in the Spanish cases. The application has to be submitted through FIFA's online system, the Transfer Matching System, or TMS. And the responsibility for submitting it lies squarely with the National Football Association, where the player intends to register, not the club itself.
Ah, okay. So the National Association handles the paperwork with FIFA.
Correct. They gather all the mandatory documents, proof of the exception, parental consent, proof of birth, etc., and submit the complete file via TMS, arguing why the exception applies beyond reasonable doubt.
That makes the National Association a really crucial gatekeeper in the process.
Very much so.
Now, what about Article 19 bis? That sounds related, but maybe slightly different.
It is different. Article 19 bis creates an obligation for clubs that run football academies. They have to report all minors who are attending their academy to the national association in whose territory that academy operates.
Reporting them.
Yeah.
Is that the same as formally registering them as players?
No, it's a separate duty. The idea behind 19Bs is for the National Association to have visibility over all minors involved with academies, whether they're officially registered players or just training there. It's for broader monitoring and protection. The National Associations also have to keep a register of these reported academy minors.
So two distinct things. Formal player registration and this broader reporting of academy attendees.
Got it.
Got it.
Yeah.
Are there any other general FIFA rules that kind of intersect with these minor regulations?
Yes, a couple are important. Article 9 deals with the International Transfer Certificate, the ITC. You need this document from the player's former association to register them internationally. Since 2015, this ITC requirement explicitly applies to minors aged 10 and over too.
Okay.
And then there's the fundamental principle in Article 5. Any player, minor or adult, must be registered with the relevant national association to participate in organized football. This basic registration rule underpins everything.
Right. So putting it all together, we have this strict ban on international moves for under 18s, a set of very specific exceptions requiring strong proof, a mandatory FIFA approval process run through the National Association via TMS for those 10 and older, a separate duty for clubs to report academy kids, and the general rules about ITCs and national registration. It's quite a web.
It absolutely is a complex framework, but ultimately built around that core principle of protecting minors.
And understanding this framework, as you said, is crucial for making sense of what happened in those Spanish cases.
Exactly. That's where we see how these rules are interpreted and enforced when things allegedly go wrong.
Okay, let's transition then from the rules on paper to how they played out or didn't play out in the real world, specifically with these major Spanish football cases.
Right. This whole saga really kicked off back in January 2013. FIFA's transfer matching system, TMS, has monitoring capabilities, and it flagged potential irregularities concerning a minor player registered with FC Barcelona.
Just one player initially.
It started small, yes, but that initial flag triggered a wider investigation by FIFA's disciplinary committee into Barcelona's practices with numerous other minors. This then broadened further to scrutinize the role of the Spanish National Association, the RFEF, and eventually led to a separate investigation into Real Madrid as well.
Now, the source article mentioned that the way Spanish football is structured might have played a part here, something about regional associations.
Yes, that's important context. Spain has, let's say, a devolved structure. A lot of the day-to-day administration, especially for youth football and regional leagues, is handled by powerful regional football associations, like the Catalan Federation or the Madrid Federation.
Okay.
So, historically, clubs might have dealt primarily with their regional association for registering players, including minors, for local competitions. The potential issue was whether this sometimes bypassed the necessary steps required by FIFA through the National Association, the RFEF, particularly for international transfers, first registrations of non-nationals, or even reporting academy players under 19 bis.
I see. So what specifically did FIFA find Barcelona had done wrong?
FIFA's disciplinary committee found Barcelona had breached quite a few rules. Primarily, violations of Article 19.1 and 19.3, meaning they'd brought in international minors or first registered non-national minors without qualifying for any of the strict exceptions.
So the substance of the moves was wrong.
Yes. And second, procedural failures under Article 19.4 in the annexes. They hadn't submitted the cases through TMS to the FIFA subcommittee for the required approval. They'd essentially bypassed the mandatory process.
Okay.
And additionally, they were found to have breached Article 19 bis because they hadn't reported minors attending their famous La Masia Academy to the RFEF, the national body.
So multiple breaches.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just Barcelona.
Okay.
The RFEF itself was sanctioned. What were their liability?
The RFEF faced significant findings. FIFA ruled they had failed in their core duty as a FIFA member association under Article 13 of the FIFA statutes, which obliges them to ensure their members, like Barcelona and Real Madrid, comply with FIFA regulations. Specifically, they failed regarding Articles 19.1 and 19.3.
So they didn't police their clubs effectively.
That was the finding. They also failed procedurally themselves, not submitting applications via TMS Art 19.4 annexes, failing to request ITCs when required for transfers, Arts 9.1, and crucially, breaching Article 5.1 by not ensuring players were properly registered with the RFEF itself before allowing them to play, even if registered regionally.
Wow, okay. A failure of oversight across the board. And Real Madrid, similar issues.
Very similar, yes. Following a separate investigation, FIFA's disciplinary committee found Real Madrid had also committed comparable breaches related to bringing in minors without meeting exceptions, Article 19.1, 19.3, bypassing the TMS approval process, Art 19.4 annexes, failing on ITC requirements, Art 9.1, and not reporting academy players to the RFEF Art 19 vice.
And these weren't just warnings, there were actual sanctions, right?
Oh, yes. Significant ones. Both Barcelona and Real Madrid were handed transfer bans, preventing them from registering any new players, nationally or internationally, for typically 2 consecutive transfer windows. Plus, hefty fines were imposed on the clubs and the RFEF, hundreds of thousands of Swiss francs.
That's serious business. And these decisions were appealed.
They were. They went through FIFA's internal appeal process and then, crucially, were taken to the Court of Arbitration for Sport CAS in Lausanne.
Right. And the CAS awards, the final judgments from these appeals, are where we get those really important legal clarifications and lessons learned.
Exactly. The CAS panels, and in Real Madrid's case, a sole arbitrator, had to grapple with the interpretation of these FIFA rules in the context of these specific facts and the Spanish system. Their reasoning is what gives us the key takeaways.
Okay, let's get into those lessons from CS. What's the first big one?
Lesson A, and this came through loud and clear, especially from the RFEF case. National associations are responsible. They cannot hide behind regional structures.
So the RFEF couldn't just say, oh, that was the regional body's job.
Absolutely not. The CAS panel stated firmly that national associations, by virtue of being FIFA members, have a duty of care. It's in the FIFA statutes, Article 13. They must ensure their members comply with FIFA regulations. Spain's fragmented system didn't excuse the RFEF's failure to implement proper oversight and ensure compliance with the RSTP.
That's a huge point for national associations everywhere.
Yeah.
The buck stops with you at the national level for FIFA rules.
Precisely. Lesson B tackled that tricky issue of age. There was confusion, particularly before 2015, about whether Article 19 applied to the very youngest minors, say under 12s, especially since the ITC requirement in Article 9 only kicked in at age 12 back then.
Right.
The CAS panels and the Barcelona and RFEF appeals ruled decisively. Article 19 and its protective measures apply to all minors under 18, regardless of the specific age threshold for needing an ITC. The rules serve different purposes. FIFA later clarified this with Circular 1468, setting the approval age at 10.
Okay, so protection applies across the board for minors.
Yeah.
But wasn't there a slight twist in the Real Madrid case on this point?
Yes. This is Lesson B, Part 2, perhaps. The sole arbitrator handling the Real Madrid appeal took a slightly different stance, specifically regarding the U12 players involved before that 2015 FIFA circular provided clarity.
How so?
The arbitrator looked at FIFA's own communications and guidance at that time and found them ambiguous regarding the application of Article 19 to U12s. Based on that lack of clear instruction from FIFA itself back then, the arbitrator concluded Real Madrid shouldn't be held liable for those specific U12 breaches that occurred before the rules were formally clarified.
That's fascinating. It really underscores the importance of clear, unambiguous regulations from governing bodies.
Yeah.
You can't penalize someone for ambiguity in your own rules.
Exactly. A key lesson in regulatory practice. Okay, Lesson C clarified Article 5, the player registration rule.
Yeah.
Remember the clubs registered players with regional associations? CAS decided that the clubs, Barcelona, Real Madrid, hadn't violated Article 5 by doing that because Spanish national law actually required regional registration for them to play in regional competitions.
Okay, so the clubs were following local law there.
Correct. But crucially, CAS found that the RFEF did violate Article 5.1. Why? Because as the national association responsible for implementing FIFA's RSTP framework, the RFEF had the duty to ensure players were ultimately registered with the RFEF itself, not just regionally, for the purposes of organized football under FIFA's umbrella.
So there's a difference between registration for local play under national law and the registration required at the national level to comply with FIFA's international framework.
Precisely. The National Association needed a system to capture that registration nationally. And Lesson D confirmed the distinct nature of Article 19, the Academy Reporting Rule.
Right, separate from player registration.
Yes. CAS confirmed that the clubs were in breach of 19Bs for failing to report minors attending their academies to the RFEF, the national body, even if those kids were registered regionally as players. The purpose of 19Bs, the court affirmed, is broader tracking and protection of all minors in academies, registered or not.
Got it. Different rule, different purpose, both need compliance. Reporting isn't registration.
Spot on. And just briefly on the sanctions, CAS largely upheld the transfer bans and fines for Barcelona and the RFEF, deeming them proportionate deterrents. Real Madrid's sanction, however, was reduced, partly due to that finding about the U12s and the prior lack of clarity.
Okay, so summing up those CAS lessons. National associations are ultimately liable. Protection rules apply to all minors. Clarity is key. National registration is required for the FIFA framework. And academy reporting is a separate, vital duty.
Those are the big takeaways from the legal battle, setting clear precedents.
So, based on all that, what are the practical implications? What should national associations and clubs really focus on now?
Well, pulling it all together from the CAS findings and the FIFA guidance, there are some clear action points. First, national associations must be proactive overseers. They need robust internal systems to monitor their club's compliance with the RSTP, especially regarding minors. Relying on regional bodies isn't enough. The FIFA responsibility rests nationally.
They need to own that compliance function.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Second, clarity on age. The rules apply to all minors. Any international transfer or first registration for a player aged 10 or over needs that formal FIFA approval via TMS based on proving a valid exception beyond reasonable doubt. No shortcuts.
So rigorous process is key.
Third, national registration linkage. Associations need to ensure their systems guarantee that players, even if registered regionally for local leagues, are also properly registered with the National Association as Article 5 requires for the overall framework.
Bridging that potential gap between local and national systems.
Exactly. Fourth, Article 19 is compliance. Clubs with academies must report all attending minors to their national association, and national associations need to maintain that register and likely follow up. It's not just about registered players, it's about all kids in the academy environment.
Two separate checklists, basically. Player registration and academy reporting.
You could think of it that way. And underpinning all exceptions is the burden of proof beyond reasonable doubt. This means meticulous collection and submission of documents through TMS by the National Association. Employment contracts, school enrollment, residency proof, court orders, whatever proves the exception legitimately applies. The FIFA Guide provides helpful checklists for this.
And that data is submitted via TMS? The guide mentions it's kept confidential.
Yes, FIFA emphasizes that the sensitive personal data of minors and families is handled confidentially within the secure TMS platform, used solely for assessing the application.
Okay, so bringing this back to you, our listener. Maybe you're a parent navigating this, or a coach, an agent, a club administrator, maybe working within an association, or even just a fan interested in how the game is governed. These Spanish cases really throw a spotlight on why these rules exist and the serious consequences of getting it wrong. They're not just red tape. They're fundamentally about protecting young athletes from potential exploitation as they pursue their dreams. Ignoring or misunderstanding them led to significant sanctions.
Definitely. So to quickly recap the core lessons hammered home by these cases, national associations hold the ultimate responsibility for ensuring clubs comply. The protection rules are universal for minors. National-level registration is essential for the FIFA framework, and reporting academy minors is a distinct but vital duty. These CAS decisions really force clarity on these points.
You know, these deep dives into regulations can seem dry, but they really highlight the tension between global rules and local realities and the impact on actual people. These cases clarified who's responsible and how these protective rules should work.
Yeah, absolutely.
So here's a final thought for you to consider. We see this tension. International rules aiming for strong protection, often requiring proof beyond reasonable doubt, versus the varied legal systems and football structures within each country, like Spain's regional setup. How can the system effectively balance that need for rigorous, verifiable protection for minors with the need for practical, workable processes that don't unfairly block legitimate international moves? Finding that perfect balance remains a key challenge for global football governance.
A very pertinent question to ponder.
That wraps up our deep dive into FIFA's regulations on minors and the crucial lessons learned from the Spanish CAS cases.